For years, Jamaicans have carried the memory of Ananda Dean's tragic death as a wound that never truly healed. But behind the headlines and the familiar retelling of her abduction, there are details, some overlooked, some forgotten, and some too painful to confront, that give new weight to her story. The case of 11-year-old Ananda was not just a crime. It was a turning point in the nation's conscience, exposing failures in how children were protected, how justice was pursued, and how silence can sometimes shield monsters. Ananda Kaydeen Dean was more than just the name behind Jamaica's child recovery system. She was a daughter, a student, and a symbol of innocence whose life was stolen before it ever truly began. In revisiting her case, we uncover not only the timeline of her disappearance and death, but also the gaps, the unanswered questions, and the lasting impact that forced a nation to change. This is her story. If you find these videos interesting or eye-opening, please give the video a like and don't forget to subscribe to Cold Case Cafe. Ananda was born on September 13, 1996 in Kingston, Jamaica. She grew up in Constant Spring near St. Andrew in a loving family that cherished her deeply. Teachers and neighbors remembered her as a bright, respectful child with a warm smile and a kind heart. At Swallowfield All Age, where she was a student, she stood out for her good manners, her eagerness to learn, and her easygoing spirit. At just 11 years old, Ananda had her whole future ahead of her. She was a symbol of innocence, a girl who wanted nothing more than to go to school, spend time with her family, and dream about the future. But in September 2008, those dreams were stolen. On Wednesday, September 10th, Ananda attended school as usual at Swallowfield All Age. That afternoon, around 4 p.m., she left the compound to head home to Constant Spring. Like many children, she relied on public transportation. Witnesses recalled seeing her enter a white Toyota Corolla taxi heading in the direction of Halfway Tree. But she never made it home. When she failed to arrive, her family immediately grew concerned. At first, they hoped there might have been a delay in traffic, or maybe she had stopped to talk with friends. But as the evening wore on, dread took over. Phone calls went unanswered. That night, her family reported her missing, sparking what would become one of Jamaica's most heartbreaking searches. On September 10, 2008, the day of her disappearance, it was a regular Wednesday afternoon in Kingston. School had just ended, and students poured out into the busy streets. Around 4 p.m., 11-year-old Ananda was last seen leaving the school compound. That night, friends and relatives began searching the route she normally took home. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Flyers were hastily printed and posted around Swallowfield, Halfway Tree, and Constant Spring. The first 24 hours were filled with desperate hope that maybe she might have gotten lost, that maybe she would have walked through the door at any moment. But deep down, her family feared something much darker. The next day, September 11th, police joined in on the search. Officers visited the school, questioning teachers, students, and local taxi drivers. They confirmed that Ananda had indeed left school safely but never reached her destination. Community members organized volunteer searches across St. Andrew. Flyers with her picture were distributed, and appeals went out on radio stations all over the nation. Her disappearance quickly began making headlines, with nightly newscasts urging anyone with information to step forward. Still, there were no solid leads that emerged. By the second full day of her disappearance, September 12th, Jamaica was on high alert. There were many public appeals. Television programs showed Ananda's smiling school photo along with the words, "Missing Child." Her family made public pleas begging for her safe return. Taxi operators across Kingston were questioned, but no one could confirm what happened to the car she had entered. Some rumors circulated, but none were strong enough to break the case. Her absence left her family sleepless. Each hour that passed made the possibility of finding her alive feel smaller and smaller as their desperation grew. On September 13, which should have been a day of celebration because this day was her birthday, Ananda would have turned 12 years old. Instead of balloons, cake, and laughter, her family spent the day in agony. Her parents held on to fragile hope that she was still alive somewhere, praying for a miracle. Community vigils were held and church groups prayed for her safe return. But despite the mounting public pressure, the investigation seemed to just stall. Leads were scarce, and police struggled to piece together her last known movements. On the fourth day of her disappearance, September 14th, Jamaica's worst fears were realized. Around midday, a passerby discovered a body in a bushy, secluded area off the Belvedere Main Road in Red Hills, that's in St. Andrew. The smell led searchers to the same scene. Police were called in, and it was soon confirmed. The remains belonged to Ananda Dean. She had been missing for 4 days. By the time her body was found, it was already partially decomposed, suggesting she had been killed not too long after being abducted. The news spread like wildfire across Jamaica. Schools, churches, and communities fell into mourning. What had been a hopeful search turned into national grief. On September 15th, the police launched a major probe into Ananda's murder. Roadblocks were set up in Red Hills, and forensic teams scoured the area for evidence. Suspects were brought in for question, but with no witnesses willing to testify and no clear trail of evidence, the case quickly grew cold. The media continued covering the story, demanding and asking and pleading for justice. Protesters gathered outside police stations, calling for tougher measures to protect children. Despite public outrage, no one was ever charged with her murder. Although justice was never served, Ananda's death sparked national reform. In May 2009, the Jamaica government introduced the Ananda Alert system. Modeled after the U.S. Amber Alert, this program was designed to broadcast missing children reports across television, radio, and SMS messages within minutes of a disappearance being reported. Every time the system is triggered, Jamaicans are reminded of the little girl whose name it bears, a symbol of how one child's death changed the entire country's approach to missing children. Ananda Kaydeen Dean should have lived to grow into a young woman, to chase her dreams and to make her family proud. Instead, her life was cut short so cruelly, and her killer was never brought to justice. But her story did not end in silence. Out of her tragedy, Jamaica created a system that continues to save lives. Ananda's memory is etched into the Ananda Alert, a shield for other children who go missing, a lifeline for families who pray for safe returns. Her story is one of pain, loss, and injustice, but also of a legacy. A young girl gone too soon, but never forgotten. I am the voice, and we will return next week with another cold case. Until then, stay safe.